Welcome into the Blogger Bowl week, whatever the hell we're calling this edition. I am Matt Rooney alongside my co-host, and what a guest I was able to get to fill in this week. Heisman finalist Stetson Bennett able to join us on the show this week.
I'm
Stetson,
about as old as him.
how you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm great. I'm just going to give all the glory to God. This is a team for my team. Nah, man, that was such a hate bet. I really did not want to make that bet, and then I ended up making that bet, and it ended up working out because Heisman voters are predictably stupid. And
I feel bad almost for Stetson Bennett at this point because he he doesn't deserve to go to New York, but he also did have a great career and he didn't ask to be a Heisman finalist. He just went out and won football games, and it's not his fault that college football media has kind of started acting the way that they do. But he's taken a lot of flack from people. And he's not that bad. He's just not a Heisman finalist.
He's fine. He's not even the best player on his. He's the second best player on his offense, maybe the third best player on his team. Jalen Carter, Brock Bowers are better players.
Jalen Carter's so good.
He's not the best quarterback in the SEC, and I'm not even saying that as an opinion. I'm saying that as a statement of fact, seeing as how Hendon Hooker was first-team All-SEC this year. So, I mean, it's whatever. The Heisman voters are utterly predictable in what they're doing and how they're going to do things. And if they want to give Stetson Bennett the award, that's great. I bet him at 55-1 during the Georgia-Oregon game. So I was like, shit, if they want to give him the award, that's fantastic. I'm hoping the chalk is the chalk for a reason and Caleb Williams wins it. Because here's my analysis on the Heisman Trophy real quick before we talk about this. And we'll launch into it. It'll be kind of a good springboard into it. So I spent a lot of time talking about the Heisman, thinking about the Heisman, betting the Heisman in the preseason. And it turns out, don't do that and just get angry because you have a parlay with the favorite to win the Heisman, CJ Stroud, and Josh Allen to win NFL MVP. And just get angry and go on tilt when CJ Stroud can't throw the ball into the wind against Northwestern and bet Caleb Williams at 15-1 and win money. So there you go. You know, he was 15-1 during the Ohio State Northwestern game. I bet him and Bryce Young at that point. This was before the LSU game. I was like, whatever, I'll do it. Fine. I hate this, but it's okay. And now it looks like before the odds I haven't seen go back up this week. Before they went down, I think Caleb Williams was minus 2,500.
Yeah, he got this. Yeah, as high as his low high is minus 2,500.
Yeah,
he is at minus 1,600 on FanDuel right now. Next is Max Duggan at plus 1,600. Stetson Bennett 30-1. CJ Stroud 40-1. Caleb Williams versus the field. The field is plus 1080.
Interesting. I mean, at this point, I'd play Duggan if I was going to still bet it because but I can't bet for whatever reason. I can't bet it on FanDuel in Connecticut. I can bet it in Connecticut on DraftKings. It makes no sense. But nevertheless, and that's a good way to jump off into the only game that really affected anything this weekend, and that is Utah 47, USC 24. I will say this as far as the Heisman Trophy to wrap that conversation. If anything happened in that game, if you were going to bet, if you were going into the game saying, I'm going to wait to bet on the Heisman Trophy until everything plays out. But if I were to bet right now, I would bet Caleb Williams. If anything happened in that game that makes you think, maybe I shouldn't bet Caleb Williams to win the Heisman Trophy, you probably should not win or should not have a Heisman vote because Caleb Williams did nothing to show you that he wasn't the best player in college football if that's the way you felt going into that game. He was awesome early in that game. He had a Heisman moment run early on in the second quarter, I think it was, or late first quarter. They end up scoring a touchdown, going up 17-3. They're cruising. However, on this Heisman caliber, Heisman moment run, he ends up injuring his hamstring, apparently pretty severely. Shout out to Lincoln Riley, or shout out to head coach of USC, Caleb Williams, because Lincoln Riley said, well, I couldn't, he said he wasn't going to come out of the game. I'm like, well, you're the head coach.
You could have taken him out of the game.
Yeah, ultimately it's your decision, but he was awesome up until that point. He played pretty well the rest of the game. Caleb Williams, I think, in this game showed what he brings to that team and makes him a special player. When we talked about USC before the season, we talked about two issues that might keep them from reaching the heights they ultimately did ascend to, because even with that disappointing loss, missing out on a playoff, going 11-2 is an awesome season from where they were last year, and their win total was even 9.5, so they overachieved per Vegas's expectations. But we thought their defense was really crummy last year, and we don't know how quickly they're going to be able to fix that. And we thought their offensive line was pretty crummy last year, and we didn't know how they were going to be able to fix that. The defense continues to stink. Jim Leonard is probably going to end up going to the NFL But if I'm Lincoln Riley, I am making every overture I can to at least see how much he would like to come to
Call him.
Los Angeles and take over my defense, because Alex Grinch continues to, like, I don't understand how Alex Grinch has now ruined chances to win national championships at Ohio State, Oklahoma, and now
It's what he
USC.
does.
What he does. Their defense.
But they take the ball away sometimes,
They
Dan.
do. Oh, yeah.
They sometimes take the ball away.
He's been very boomer. His defense has always been boomer bust, not necessarily with turnovers, but with like havoc plays, getting after the quarterback.
Yeah.
And they were able to do that some this year too. But like, if they're not getting home, they're just giving a big play after big play. They were just giving up big plays to Utah. They got big boyed in this game. And as far as the offensive line,
really did.
Like Caleb Williams showed like how much they need him to be able to run, because that offensive line still is not very good. Like Utah big boyed them. Utah stepped up and they took their lumps the same way they did in Salt Lake City in the first game. They took some punches early, but they're so resolute. Again, it's about culture building. It's kind of the same thing we talk about with Michigan. What Harbaugh has done with that team, Kyle Whittingham's been doing that for years. And they said, we're fine. We're going to take your punches because we know that you aren't going to be able to keep doing that. They got lucky, of course, with the injury to Caleb Williams, but the offense was able to push USC around and make big plays. And then that defense just absolutely dominated USC up front. There was not a whole lot of one-legged Caleb Williams could do. This was not an ass-kicking contest, and apparently not good for a football player either. So, I mean, give Utah all the credit. Kyle Whittingham, again, is just a masterful head coach in building a culture.
He really is.
With a roster that's not as good as some of the other teams that they're going to have a play against. I mean, this was kind of everything we expected from USC to come home to roost, and I think it just kind of showed Caleb Williams covered up a lot of warts.
Yeah, I mean, not only all come to roost in this game, it all just came to roost really in like one quarter of football. That fourth quarter just seemed like every I don't want to say stereotype, but kind of stereotype that we had for USC football, or things that could possibly go wrong and probably should possibly go wrong for them, just started going wrong for them in that fourth quarter. They stopped taking the ball away. They were a little bit soft defensively throughout the game, with the exception of Caleb Williams. They were not able to run the football really at all, which is, we thought that might happen last week against Notre Dame possibly. It just happened a week later against the Utah defense that, credit to them, hadn't really been that great or that stout all year, and they kind of nutted up in the biggest moment, and then they went out and they shut down USC. But like, credit to Utah. Like Kyle Whittingham, I know you just said it, he's one of the more underrated coaches in this sport, and he just always has his team ready to play, believing in the message, the team, like they're never really out of it. And they're just like, they're tough, hard-nosed dudes. They just play tough, hard-nosed football. The game is not over until the game is over and the final whistle blows. Like, that team just never stops coming at you. And when you're a team like USC and we've had kind of everything going right for you this year, once one thing kind of starts leading to another, and you have a team like Utah who just is relentless like that, it's easy to let things go downhill, and that's just kind of what happened there. Credit to Utah. They just beat the hell out of them in the fourth quarter.
The only other thing I'll say about Utah, as much as we're giving them love right now, you got to win that Florida game to start the season. I'm just going to say.
You do. Like, I mean, you win that Florida game, you're probably in the playoff.
You're in the conversation. They still lost 3 games. But like,
oh wait, Jeff, I'm sorry. I thought they were in 2, or I thought they
lost the UCLA game, and like Cam Rising hadn't been right. And how tough? Like we talk about the embodiment of like what Kyle Whittingham does. That hit, that like the absolutely brutal shot that Cam Rising took, and then he just got right back up. Was awesome. And the last thing that I will say on this, because I always have to make everything about Texas, shout out to Tom Herman, who has never been a better coach in the history of football at identifying quarterbacks who are going to make really good running backs. Because Roshan Johnson was recruited as a quarterback at Texas. He's been an awesome backup to Bijan Robinson, and Jaquindon Jackson. Holy crap. Texas recruited him as a quarterback. He goes to Utah, where he just ran for 105 yards and just dominated the end of that game. So there you go, FAU. Like, you're getting a coach who knows how to recruit.
Good job, Tom.
You're going to be running backs. That was the only game that mattered in terms of the playoff picture this week.
Yeah.
Because, Georgia 50. We'll just real quick on these two. Georgia 50, LSU 30. I don't even think Georgia played that well defensively in this game. I know a lot.
No, like
it was garbage
Kirby
time.
Kirby said it afterwards. Like, he's kind of pretty, like, they won whatever 50-23 or whatever that was. And after the game, he's like, yeah, like, we can't get away playing defensively like that. Like, we just can't. That's not good enough. And
yeah,
I get what he was saying, but also that's kind of scary. That like that's how they played defensively, and that's still what the final result was. And Jalen Carter is just absolutely that dude. He's so incredibly good.
The Big Ten championship game, 43-22, Michigan. I will remember really two things from this game. One, Bijan Robinson should be the Doak Walker Award winner because Donovan Edwards had 185 yards and a touchdown. You could put just about anybody behind that Michigan offensive line in that league, and they'd win. But more importantly, the only play I'm going to remember from this game is the fake flea flicker where Devin Mockabee faked pitching it back to O'Connell and then just ran the ball for a first down. So shout out to the new Louisville head coach Jeff Brom for calling that. Like, this was never. Oh, actually, I do have to give Jim Harbaugh a ton of props because God bless Jim Harbaugh for definitely, even though he probably would never admit to it, being aware of what the spread was in that game and scoring the touchdown late for the cover. Absolutely forgettable game. I mean, there would never Michigan. It was
No, it was close at halftime, but it was never really
felt
in
like
doubt.
it was in doubt. We'll come back to this one, Alvaro, Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian, who's the better coach. That's an interesting thought. Well, I'll talk about that later if I remember. But the game that we thought might have some impact on some things, Kansas State 31, TCU 28 in overtime. I legitimately do believe that if Max Duggan hadn't literally given everything he had to give on that game-tying drive and was not hurt, they probably win that game. They also got screwed, like they scored a touchdown.
Or at the very least should have been on the 1 centimeter line.
Yeah.
They didn't score that touchdown.
And then they don't sneak the ball because, according to Dykes, they were worried about Max Duggan's health and they didn't want to risk him there.
That's fair, but also if he's hurt, you have to at least put in a backup quarterback, run a quarterback sneak. You have to try one from there.
I mean, look, if you can't get an inch, like whatever, like it happens. It is what it is. Like they've had so much variance go their way during the season that like it was bound to come back and get them. I do feel like if they win that game, Max Duggan might actually win the Heisman Trophy. People might talk themselves into that, but they don't. And it was just like, look, we thought when these two teams played the first time, Kansas State was really alive to beat them until both their quarterbacks got hurt. Will Howard played really well. They're a really well-coached team. They tried to give it away. They did everything they could to give it away. Their defense on that last touchdown drive on Duggan, just not having anyone,
just not even him, paying attention to Max Duggan was an interesting decision.
Baffling. But up until that point, like they were up 11 points in the fourth quarter of that game. And this time TCU was not able to pull the rabbit out of their hat. However, it did not end up mattering because when the playout, we got like roughly, let's see, that game probably ended about 3:00. So we got about almost 24 hours, 20 hours roughly of TCU, Alabama, who belongs in the playoff. And it turns out it did not matter even a little bit, that discussion, because Alabama was never in the conversation. And you know how you know Alabama was never in that conversation? Because the rankings were number 1 Georgia, number 2 Michigan, number 4 Ohio State, and number 3 TCU. TCU did not even fall out of the number 3 spot in this, which tells you all you need to know about how the committee viewed Alabama and what chances Alabama had of winning the national championship or playing for the national championship this year. It's very clear that it would have taken something extreme for TCU to fall out of this mix. If Max Duggan like tears his ACL, knock on wood, I'm not saying I want that to happen now. I'm saying had that happened, maybe that would be part of the conversation here. But it was not. And it's a matter of, okay, well, if Georgia loses, Michigan loses, maybe things flip around place-wise. But, like, the order seemed pretty set going into this. Alabama left out. I have some things to say about Nick Saban, but before I do, your thoughts on the order, how this all played out with Kansas State beating TCU staying number 3, and if you feel like they got the order correct.
I would have flipped the order. I would have flipped Ohio State and TCU. I do like that, they gave it, basically said TCU was never in doubt of missing the playoff because I do think they deserve that. But at the same time, I think I think that they kind of unimpressively went about their business. And I also think that as good as they've been this year, I think if you asked either team which one they'd rather play, Georgia and Michigan, they'd probably rather play TCU than Ohio State. And I think Georgia getting Ohio State is a little bit more of a punishment to Ohio State than it is a reward to TCU. And I think if you're the number 1 team in the nation, you deserve kind of the benefit of the doubt. You deserve all of the perks because of what you've done. And I think that while Georgia should absolutely still beat Ohio State, they absolutely got the more dangerous team in round 1 of the playoffs. So that's where I'm at. I'm not up in arms about it. I think the decision is fine. I understand their logic. I get where they're coming from. It's more of a reward to TCU than it is a slight on Georgia, but I do think it's a slight on Georgia, and that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I don't disagree necessarily with that assessment, but I do kind of like the idea of rewarding TCU. Like, for me, it's just so hard to ding a team for the extra data point. Like when these two teams played, 12 games, TCU had a better record than Ohio State did. So, like, for me, I agree with the assessment. I do think Ohio State's better than TCU, but at the same time, if you're talking about like who's better versus who deserves more, TCU deserved more. It is certainly kind of unfair to Georgia in that regard that they have a tougher first round game, but maybe they don't. Like, maybe the reality of the situation is TCU is the third best team because Ohio State really, like you talked about it with Noops the other day, is like Ohio State, we think and hope for our entertainment's sake, has an extra gear, but maybe they don't. And
But we don't know.
Maybe that's where they are. And like, we'll get into talking about that game a little bit. We're not going to go deep into this. Just real quick on this, for those of you wondering who are listening now, the schedule's probably going to be 3 more shows up until we get to the championship game.
Playoffs,
it's going to be basically like one slate of bowl games a week. So the third one, we will do a deep dive into all of the big games up around New Year's and the playoff and all that. So we'll kind of do what we normally do on like a Tuesday. We'll talk some openers in a bit. Actually, after I get through with my rant about Nick Saban right now. And the reason I want to rant about Nick Saban is because what Nick Saban did this weekend was honestly beneath Nick Saban. If you turned on your TV at any point on Saturday, you probably saw him. He was lobbying everywhere he could. He was politicking hard. Fox gave him a platform during the Big Ten championship.
That was a wild decision. That was more of a wild decision by Fox for me. Like, that's not even – it's not like they're an SEC network. Like, I could see it being ESPN or CBS, but of all networks to do that, Fox is a weird one.
It's not surprising to me from a TV production standpoint because, like, if you have a chance to interview Nick Saban,
you get Nick Saban one-on-one, you take it.
If I'm the commissioner of the Big 12, who I think is still Bob Bowlesby, it might not be. I don't know. I don't care. We're leaving that conference. But if I'm the commissioner of the Big 12, I am furious that Fox gave Nick Saban that platform.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like Nick Saban's team and
TCU is a Big 12 team. Yeah, it's a Fox team.
Yeah. Exactly. Like Fox has a relationship with the Big 12. They do not with the SEC. So I would have been furious. But so Nick Saban's chief argument was Alabama would be a favorite over other teams in the playoff. And that's only true about TCU. They'd be a dog to Georgia. They'd be a slight dog to Michigan. Maybe a pick 'em against Ohio State, but definitely
probably
not
a dog against Ohio State.
Probably a dog against Ohio State as well. They would be a favorite against TCU. I understand that. However, you have to understand how these lines get made. And any good power rating in college football relies a lot on priors because past success is usually a good indicator of future success and recruiting rankings. And Georgia is the only team in the last 5 years that's even close to Alabama in terms of recruiting prowess. So everything that Alabama does in terms of power ratings and being ranked highly is because of what they've done in the past. And they did nothing in 2022 to show that they were one of the top 4 teams. They were 3-6-1 against Power 5 teams against the spread this year, with a win against Vanderbilt and a push against Auburn, 2 teams who went 5-7 this year. Their wins were against Kentucky, their wins were against Mississippi State, who they blow out every single year. And that's what they do every year. And then Arkansas, who that I would say was a good win, although Arkansas's defense is absolutely atrocious. So, like, the sports books have overrated Alabama all year long. And so Saban says, well, we lost 2 games by a combined 4 points on the last play of the game. Well, who'd you lose to? You lost to a Tennessee team who got absolutely stomped by Georgia and gave up 60 points to South Carolina. And you lost to LSU, who lost by 20 points to Georgia, who wasn't even in form in that game, who also had just lost to Texas A&M. You also could have lost to Texas. You also could have lost to Texas A&M. You also could have lost to Ole Miss. We've talked about it before. This team could have gone undefeated. Yes, they could. They also could have gone 7-5. 10-2 is where they are. The committee has only ever been consistent about one thing, and that's not putting a 2-loss team in the playoff, and they didn't do that this year because Alabama, simply put, was not worthy of being in the conversation. They're absolutely a top 10 team. They might be the 5th best team in the country, but they did not belong in the playoffs. They did not deserve it, and Nick Saban politicking is beneath him, period.
I have no problem with him taking an interview to go on and like try it, but it's how he did it, if that makes sense. Like using the gambling lines as a reference, where in the past he's always laughed about it or called it rat poison. Like, that's what I have the problem with, because I think at that point, any coach in the country, if you were on the outside looking in, or you thought it might be a coin flip and you thought you going on and doing an interview might, help is going to bat for your team. Okay, fine. But the context in which he went about it, saying, the gambling lines and this and that I don't necessarily agree with. And the way he kind of tried to disparage TCU, instead of just talking about his team and how much he believed in them and this and that. That's kind of where I thought it was a little bit weird. I have no problem with him taking in the interview because his AD probably told him to do it. He probably wanted to go bat for his team and whatever. That's fine. But referencing gambling lines when it's all when you give media crap for it, or you say it's rat poison, feeding it to your players, like that's where I have the big problem with it. And hey, you have one common opponent with TCU. It's Texas. Alabama needed a last-second field goal, and I know the scoreboard didn't say it, but TCU kicked the shit out of Texas. The scoreboard didn't say it, but like you watched the game, like TCU was never really in doubt.
TCU played better against Texas than Alabama did. I think TCU's offense was horrible in that game. Like, TCU scored touchdowns on 2 kind of fluky plays, and their defense was incredible in that game. Mm-hmm. Like, they looked better in that game than Alabama did. I think, like, circumstantially it was a little different, but if you're just looking at the same data point, like, yeah, TCU played better.
Yeah, I mean, that is the data point. That's the one data point that they have in common. So, and one went to a conference championship game. One won their own division.
Like, one lost a game.
Like, not a division, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nick Saban is also Nick Saban's also the guy who has been quoted saying, if you don't play for your conference championship, you don't deserve to go to the playoffs.
Right. So. Exactly. Like, it's so full of shit. All right. So we have our playoff matchups set. We talked about them a little bit in terms of at least who's playing who. The schedule, we will start just real quick on these 2 games. The first one is the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. It's not even the PlayStation or Tostitos Fiesta Bowl anymore. Do the players
I miss properties? Are Tostitos they needs to buy. They must get like Verbo gift cards.
I mean, I will say this: like, I've looked. If they want to sponsor the show, like, hey, Verbo, hook us up. But like, we've been joking for a while that we need to do a BetSperts company outing for BetSperts, like a work thing, because the Super Bowl and the Waste Management Open. Wow, this lighting is really bad. I'm just going to be in the dark. Waste Management Open. The Waste Management Open and the Super Bowl are going to both be in Phoenix at the same time. We do BetSperts Golf. We do a lot of NFL content between BetSperts, DLF, and 4for4. So we should go to Arizona and just like do a week of content out there for that. And if you look on Verbo for like big vacation stuff, there's a lot of great stuff out there. So, maybe it makes sense. Arizona, there's a lot of Verboing. Nevertheless, the Verbo Fiesta Bowl, TCU and Michigan. Michigan, a 7.5 point favorite. The total is 58.5. And
didn't obviously open at 9.5.
I think it opened pretty high and then dropped down. Okay. I think it opened around there. It depends on the book. Some books were late. Like, I think Circa opened it at 7.5 after some of the other books kind of jumped the gun on it. But it's sitting around 7.5 right now. It's 58.5 is the total. Just like, you don't have to give me a pick, obviously. What are your just like early thoughts on this game?
We talked about it on Brown Bag Bets a little bit on Tuesday in case anybody saw that. But I'm leaning towards some form of TCU first half play, Michigan full game play. Michigan has been a slow first half team throughout the year. We saw it against Purdue. We saw it a lot throughout the regular season. We saw it a little bit even against Ohio State. I think TCU is going to be in a pretty good spot to cover a first half spread, if not win a first half money line. But then Michigan, I was about to say Michigan State. It's definitely not Michigan State in the playoff. Michigan will come out in the second half like they have most of these games and probably be the better team and probably take control. So that's where I probably like them. But early on, I think that's, I don't know how I want to do it yet, or whether that's parlay some money lines or whether that's just individually bet some spreads. But I like TCU in a first half, Michigan for a game.
I honestly think that we might be undervaluing TCU a little bit here. And here's my case for this. So first and foremost, I know history means a lot to people, and I understand the history of the college football playoff has been semifinal games have been largely dog do over time. Yeah. Like there's like 2 or 3 good ones in the 7 years we've been doing this. So I understand that concern. I think we're probably, and I don't think the gaps are massive, but I think we're overrating Michigan a little bit, and I think we're underrating TCU a little bit as well. Why do I think we're overrating Michigan? I think we're reading a little bit too much into what happened in the Ohio State game to make Michigan over a touchdown favorite in this game. They did not flat out dominate Ohio State in that game. They wore Ohio State down, and they were like we talked about last week, like they were a more physical team. They were the better coached team. They had the better culture in that game. And when it came down to it, they were able to make the plays that Ohio State was not able to do. However, we talked about it. I talked about it last week. They had 5 plays for like 350 yards and then 3 yards per play the rest of the game. It was not a domination. It was a lot more of an even game than you would think. And it was a game where they wore Ohio State down, like I said earlier. So I think we might be overrating Michigan a touch. TCU, here's my main argument for TCU why I'm interested in what they're going to do in 3 weeks. Do you know how many consecutive games they played to end the season?
how many consecutive games they played
without
to
a
end the
bye week.
season.
Yeah, without a bye week.
Geez, when was their bye week?
Well, that would kind of give it away.
It was
They played
10.
they played 11 consecutive games to end the season. Their bye
That's a
week was
lot.
in week 3. So they played Colorado and Tarleton.
Yeah,
Then they
those
had
guys needed the week off.
yeah. And
Or 3 weeks off, I should say.
they really got stretched after that road trip to Colorado. You play in the thin air. Then you come home and you play a Tarleton team who's like went from like Division 3 to FCS, or like went from nothing to FCS, and they're trying to make that was a really tough first 2 weeks of the season for them. So they needed that bye week. And and we talked about it like when it happened. Like they played SMU rivalry game, Oklahoma big game for a new coaching staff, the Kansas game where game day was, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, at West Virginia, Texas, Baylor. Then the Iowa State game was kind of an off week, but whatever. And then Kansas, they played so many games in a row. And when you're a team like TCU that does not have the depth that a Georgia does, or an Alabama does, or even like necessarily like what Texas should have, that's going to put a toll on your bodies over time. Like Quentin Johnson with injuries down the stretch. So now
Max Duggan, you can tell, has been dealing with just his body being hurt for the last couple of weeks too.
Exactly. He was out of gas completely by the end of that game. They now have 3 weeks to get ready for this game, and I think they have a phenomenal coaching staff. I think they're going to be really ready to play that game, and I really think that they're going to have a chance to make this a fun game. Would I pick it?
I'm interested in it. Yeah.
If I had to pick it, I would pick it. I'm not ready to make any kind of pick. I'm probably not going to bet. I'll do picks because we do picks for the show. I don't know what angle I want to bet for that game just yet, so we'll see from there. And then Georgia and Ohio State, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. God bless Chick-fil-A for just never not sponsoring that game.
Good on them.
Everything else.
If they want to sponsor the show, that'd be great.
Yeah, everything else about Chick-fil-A is kind of dicey, but like the one thing I will say though, I don't know what the prices are at the Mercedes-Benz
chicken sandwiches aren't dicey, Dan. They're delicious.
The sandwiches are dicey. However, they were like when I went to the Peach Bowl. So I've been to 3 Peach Bowls. I went to, when I was in high school, we did a fundraiser at a Georgia Tech LSU one where LSU kicked the shit out of Georgia Tech. And then I had to ride the MARTA train, which is the Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. So like the public transportation from this stadium back to my car, and was just around drunk LSU fans. Not a great experience when you're like 17 years old. And then then one of my best friends went to Miami, and they played in back-to-back Peach Bowls. They beat Florida one year, and then the next year was the game that ended the Miami program as we know it. That was the game where they got beat 40-3 by LSU, and then they fought in the tunnel after the game and got their ass kicked there. Nevertheless, it's a long way to say Chick-fil-A sandwiches at the Georgia Dome during those games were like $5, which, in the early 2000s, that's a lot of money. Now, because of inflation, probably about the right price. They also, I don't remember the name of the place offhand. I wish I did, but there's a vendor at Mercedes-Benz Stadium that sells what's basically a homemade Chick-fil-A sandwich, and the name of it like riffs on the fact that they're not open on Sundays. Chick-fil-A is not open on Sundays. Nevertheless, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Ohio State's a 6.5-point underdog to Georgia, 61.5. I mean, I feel like we've talked about this time and time again about what our expectations are for these two teams. Like, real quick, like Ohio State, is there an extra gear? Is this a team that is going to be able to put it into high gear? Jackson Smith and Jigba not playing. I actually do have another rant that I want to do after we talk about this game about that. Georgia, they've played with their food a lot. They even play with their food to a degree against LSU. Their offense was really good that whole game against LSU, but their defense was not. I don't even think like I said earlier, like I don't think their defense was great in that game. For me, I guess the only thing I'm going to say is like, can Ohio State match Georgia's physicality? Can Ohio State protect CJ Stroud well enough in this game for him to be able to make throws? If Georgia can hurry him up, that's when we've seen him struggle. I feel like Georgia's going to be able to do that. And then the Ohio State defense, can they make Stetson Bennett uncomfortable as well? Are they going to be able to handle the physicality of the Georgia offensive line and be able to stop the run game for Georgia, which has been really good the last few weeks, and then obviously the aliens that they have at tight end?
It all just comes down to me. Is Ohio State's offense going to play conservative, or are they going to do what they are able to do and go right at Georgia? If they play conservative and try and make Georgia make a mistake and then they capitalize on that, they're not going to win the football game, and it's probably not going to be close. But if they use their quarterback, who is one of the more accurate passers in college football, to take shots downfield to their eventual Biletnikoff winning receiver, or a bunch of their other 5-star receiver in Ibuka, or if they take their shots downfield That's how they're going to beat Georgia. They're not going to beat Georgia by trying to dink and dunk their way down the football field. That's just not going to happen. And what's going to happen is Georgia's going to win the battle of attrition, just like Michigan did, because Georgia's going to take some shots. Georgia's going to beat them up front, and eventually in the fourth quarter, Georgia's going to pull away. Ohio State needs to put up a lot of points. They need to do it early. They need to be aggressive from the get-go. And I'm not sure from what we've seen from Ryan Day in years past that he's capable of having that game plan, because he talks a big game. And, they said after they got in, they're going to learn from their Michigan loss, and they know what they have to do, and they have to be more aggressive and all that. But we've heard that before, and we're going to see if they actually go through with it now or not. But they are the team in my head that is the most capable of beating Georgia because of their talent level. Their talent level is as high as Georgia's, in my opinion. I'm not sure that they have the coaching or the mentality to compete with Georgia.
Yeah, I do think Ohio State can contend in this game. I agree with what you just said there. Now, but if I had to bet it right now, I'd bet Georgia.
100%. If you said life or death, I had to pick a side. I'd take Georgia 6.5 in a heartbeat.
I'm just not all that interested in betting against Georgia through everything that we've seen. One thing I do want to rant on, because this just pissed me off today.
Sure.
I'm sorry to go and just criticize specifically ESPN, but Todd McShay was on College Football Live yesterday and said that he's talked to a bunch of scouts who said that they know that Jackson Smith-Njigba is healthy enough to play and he's going to sit out anyway. And that's just wildly irresponsible. Even if you know that, even if that's something that you firmly believe in your heart of hearts to be true, you cannot go on television and say, I've talked to scouts, many NFL scouts who believe that he is healthy enough to play. But he is not going to play in this game. You cannot do that. You cannot throw a kid under the bus like that. You have to put names to it if you're going to say it. If you're going to put it out there, there has to be someone who comes out and says, I believe that this is what's happening in this case. You cannot do that. So wildly irresponsible for ESPN, more so Todd McShay, to put that out there. I'm just using the platform and the three people who are watching this to hear me say that, because I am not shy about giving my opinions on anything. And I think this is just a Bush League move to say that. Also,
yeah, and it's not like Todd McShay is somebody that needs to do something like that,
right?
Not that anybody, but it's not like it's some nobody trying to make their name. Todd McShay is one of the most established draft analysts in all of football. It's not like you need to get this big scoop to make your name. You're already Todd McShay.
Yeah. So and I don't think the idea of a player sitting out a playoff game would go over well with the ultra football brained NFL people. You know what I mean?
I would actually agree with that.
If you sit out the fucking Alamo Bowl or whatever, fine, no one cares. But sitting out a playoff game, that's a competitive thing that you're sitting out.
That is a thing. And if I was an NFL scout, honestly, I would think about that. And you're doing it to ensure your NFL future, obviously. So you wouldn't do that in the NFL, but still, that would be something that would be a miniature red flag for me.
It wouldn't be a red flag for me. I would understand, if a player makes the decision and think is best for them, then that's fine. It would just be a weird decision to me. I'm going to play 13 games to get into the playoff, but then it's time for the playoff. It's well, I guess that 3 weeks means I'm not going to play because I might tear my ACL and that's going to set me back.
Well, he only played 2.
Well, yeah. So no, I'm talking about in general. I just mean.
Okay, gotcha. I thought you talked about
Jackson Smith, and the other thing, he fucking played against Toledo. You're telling me this guy doesn't want to play in the playoff, but he would try to play against Toledo. And I understand, you get 2-3 extra months to recover if you get hurt against Toledo than you do in this game. It just doesn't make any sense. Real quick, before I move on to my bowl game superlatives, as Alvaro asked this question, Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian, who's the better coach?
Spider-Man meme?
Lane Kiffin?
I lean towards Lane?
Maybe? Don't really know. Man, Spider-Man meme's a good way to describe it. I think Steve Sarkisian is a more mature coach. I think Lane Kiffin is better at the connecting with his players. But mature Steve Sarkisian, who has conquered his alcohol problems and has recouped his career and learned from Nick Saban in Alabama. If you were to what is that movie? Freaky Friday, these coaches in these jobs, I honestly don't know that they look any different. I really don't.
Yeah, no, I think they'd be doing the same exact thing as each other is at their schools.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, no, say there's moments with these guys where they're playing in games where you're saying, oh man, really good coach. And then there's moments where you're like, dude, what? Like, why did we not give the ball to Bijan Robinson, or why did we not give the ball to Quinshon Judkins here at the end of the Alabama game? Like, there's moments that like those guys want to be the smartest guy in the room, but I do think they're both good coaches. But yeah, they're Spider-Man to me. They're the same person. So I don't know if that answers your question, Alvaro, but they're the same person.
Yeah, I mean that was a stumper.
It's Steve Kiffin and Lane Sarkisian.
Steve Kiffin.
I actually like the name Lane Sarkisian. That's a good name.
Lane Sarkisian. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. It's like got a bone of cadence to it. That's really good. All right, so we're not gonna go through every bowl game. Like I said, next week we'll do like the first 10 or how many ever in the first week of the bowl games. But I did come up with some like things that interest me in the form of bowl game superlatives.
Sure.
So bear with me and chime in on any of these if you have any thoughts on any of these stupid things that I have come up with my brain. So the first one is most likely to succeed. That is the Lending Tree Bowl. And the reason I say that is because Rice is playing in this game, and Rice is 5-7. There weren't enough bowl eligible teams, so they got in because they had the highest APR of all the bowl ineligible teams. Unlike Cardale Jones, some kids are there to play school, so shout out to Rice and the smart kids there. My next one is the I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, and that is the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. You might be thinking, well, Kansas, is this Kansas bowl eligible for the first time since 2008, or Kansas State, like getting a chance to like play the big boys in Alabama? Nuh-uh. This is very much about color. And that color I'm talking about comes from the Yipsy Gypsies from Eastern Michigan, who get to trade the crappy gray monochrome nastiness of their home field in Ypsilanti for the beautiful blue turf of Boise, Idaho. Not exactly a destination that I would think you would want to go to, but shout out to Eastern Michigan.
That's a fantastic matchup for me. Eastern Michigan and San Jose State, two teams that would never, ever sniff playing each other. Get each other in the Idaho Potato Bowl. I love it. That's the magic of bowl season. And anybody who says that there's too many bowls is not a person that you need in your life.
I agree with that assessment a lot. My next one is the Do You Like Apples, which is the Fenway Bowl. Matt, do you like apples?
I do.
Well, Cincinnati just stole Louisville's head coach. How do you like them apples? Well,
I love it. I wish that Satterfield was on the Cincinnati sideline in some form. That would be so awesome. It's so great.
Well, to answer the question, I think Louisville is actually just fine that Cincinnati stole their coach.
Yeah, that was the weirdest relationship. And Satterfield had been trying to get out of there since he took the job. It's like he got hired and was immediately looking to leave and saying the best thing about Louisville is the airport. That was just a very weird hire from the first place. And it seems like Louisville finally got their guy that they tried to get years ago, and Braum wanted to see it through with Purdue. And I think this year he probably saw that he's probably taken Purdue as far as he can get them, especially with divisions going away, and Louisville gave him a bag. So good on, I think for Louisville, just kind of his best case scenario. You got the guy out of there that didn't want to be there, and you got your guy.
The funny thing is like Satterfield's leaving behind a pretty good recruiting class, although they did lose the prize prospect.
Was it Reuben Owens?
Reuben Owens, whose recruiting was a disaster. Also got the Louisville area code tattooed on his arm, so good for him there. But this is actually this could be the fun, chippy game for those of you who are unaware. These are old rivals. They played for a rivalry trophy called the Keg of Nails, which is badass. The rivalry ended when Louisville went to the ACC, so now they get to go play each other. Cincinnati stole Louisville's head coach, and because the dimensions at Fenway Park are so wonky, they're going to be on the same sideline because there's not room on the other side of the field for a sideline and players. So
who said there's too many bowls?
Exactly.
Nobody.
So, and it's an 11 a.m. game in Boston. Could not be a better setting for an old rivalry game between two teams that haven't played in a decade. The we're really happy to be here is the Quick Lane Bowl, which, again, I think Detroit gets a bad rap, but I would willingly admit Detroit in December, not exactly a place I'm clamoring to go.
It's not ideal.
Tell that to Bowling Green, who hasn't been to a bowl game since 2015, and our New Mexico State Aggies, or my New Mexico State Aggies, playing in just their second bowl game since 1960. The Let's Get Weird is the Sun Bowl, because every year the Sun Bowl is the Let's Get Weird Bowl. El Paso guys will probably have been in Mexico drinking all week and then showing up hungover as hell for the game. Keaton Slovis is already gone for Pitt. Who the hell knows who's going to play for UCLA? It's El Paso in late December. It could snow. Who the hell knows what's going to happen with those two teams? And it involves Pat Narduzzi, which means it could also just suck.
Yeah, possibly. I was talking to Phil earlier this week. The Phil Yurkovich and Pat Narduzzi combination is just going to be very, very fun for me. Fun because it's going to be so hilarious. It's going to just be so boring.
It can't be much worse for him than it was at Boston College.
He just wants to play Notre Dame really badly. He's going to another place where he can go play Notre Dame. Try and stick it to him again one more time. No, he's actually going home, which makes sense.
You guys didn't respond when Drew Pine said he was going into the. No, when Phil Dracovic was going into the transfer portal, I tweeted. I said I heard Notre Dame's looking for a quarterback.
No, I responded to that in my head.
Yeah.
He'd
The
be a good
slap.
fit if he wants to come.
I think he can aim a little higher. Honestly,
New coaching staff.
They should go get Devin Leary. That's neither here nor there. The slap in the
I think
face.
they're gonna try.
They should. The slap in the face is the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. Baylor's biggest rival, arguably TCU. TCU is in the playoff. Baylor is not. Baylor is in the Armed Forces Bowl, which is played where, Matt? In TCU's home stadium.
I was going to say Dallas, Texas.
Or Fort Worth, Texas. Technically. But so they get to watch their rival play in the playoff, and they have to go play in their rival stadium in a meaningless bowl game. I've just labeled this one drugs in all caps with a question with an exclamation point. Texas Tech and Ole Miss playing in the Tax Act Texas Bowl. I mean, agents of chaos on both sides. And shout out to NRG Stadium in Houston, home of the Texans, that actually gets to see some interesting football for the first time all year.
Offense.
Then two more. Offense. I call this one the Welcome Home, the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl. Mac Brown's 6th time in his career coaching in the Holiday Bowl. His first one at Texas was actually against Oregon. They've played some wild games over the year. Lost.
They're going to name the trophy after
Wisconsin. And now he gets to watch Gene Chizik try to stop Bo Nix, who is everything I've heard as of a few hours ago was planning on playing. Weird times. And then the marquee bowl game. Fuck your playoff games. Fuck the Rose Bowl. Fuck whatever other bowl games you have. Give me the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl, the only bowl game, Matt, featuring 2 conference champions playing against each other. Troy, UTSA. Just watch this game. Good football across both sides. Frank Harris got a huge bag to come back for another year to UTSA, announced it yesterday, with like civic leaders from the city of San Antonio around. They're building some good things there at UTSA. They're headed into the American. A chance to really become kind of the new power group of 5 power team, given that Houston is now stepping up in competition, Cincinnati, UCF moving into the Big 12 next year. So those are my bowl superlatives. I've wasted a lot of time. What ones are you, of the ones I didn't list here, are there any matchups that stand out to you and you're not allowed to say whatever shitty bowl Iowa and Kentucky are playing in?
No, God, no. Well, that's going to be an awesomely bad game. But no, you forgot it's always going to be Popeyes to Me Bowl, the Bahamas Bowl, that kicked off bowl season with Miami, Ohio, and UAB. Also the Orange Bowl. We have Orange versus Orange, in the Orange Bowl, which, by the way, if they don't let both teams wear all orange, what are we doing here?
I mean, I don't think you can.
Well, no, you could. You could. You absolutely can. Tennessee has the orange helmets.
Tennessee should either wear the smoky grays or the all blacks, and Clemson should wear all purple. Throw everyone for a curveball.
Boo! All orange all the time. And then I saw Nick, what's the 5-star quarterback Tennessee recruited? He's going to be able to dress for the game.
Is he really?
I think I believe I said, unless I was getting trolled on Twitter by somebody, that Tennessee's 5-star quarterback, due to early enrollment and that it's not a regular season game, that it's a postseason game, is going to be able to dress.
Well, I know, like,
and something with NIL as well.
I feel like DJ, maybe this wasn't good at the time, but I feel like DJ, you enrolled early, and he was playing Jalen Hurts in the play, or playing, like, he was the scout team quarterback for Clemson, and I feel like Tua might have been Deshaun Watson for Clemson as a just an early enrollee. So it's not uncommon. I don't think they'll play. Like, if you're Tennessee, like, this is a Joe Milton showcase, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of has to be.
Like, you just want to show, like, hey, Joe Milton's our guy. Like, this is why you should buy hype into him next year, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Also, with Joe Milton, you never know where the ball is going to go.
No,
like, it's going to go 100 miles per hour.
And it's either going to be awesome or a train wreck, and there's no in between.
Which I love. Hey, I appreciate that. I think we all should appreciate that.
I'm a big fan.
Are there any other ones that are on your radar?
All of them, Dan. They're all on my radar.
Yeah, I mean,
every one of them.
That are better than others. There's the Kyle Van Treese revenge game between Georgia Southern and Buffalo. You know, give me, like, whatever one's going to be on a Tuesday at, like, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Those are the best. Those are the best games. Those are the ones I live for.
It's going to be, like, bowl season's going to kind of be my methadone for the World Cup.
Yeah, I know Potato Bowl, 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon.
Like, what could be better? Like, what more could you need?
There's nothing better in sports than that.
I'll give my spiel. There is one, actually. There's one that I would lock in right now. It is the under, I think it's 43 and a half under Oklahoma State, Wisconsin in the guaranteed rate bowl. No idea how that game gets into the 40s. Everyone on Oklahoma State is transferring. Spencer Sanders is gone. Their leading receiver's gone. They've had more than 10 players go into the portal. Graham
Wisconsin's
Hart's
just
in the portal, but that's probably addition by subtraction. Wisconsin. Jim Leonard's last game coaching at Wisconsin. I think it's going to be an emotional one for him, and I think that defense is really going to want to play well. Don't know how that one's going to get into the 40s. Otherwise, I think you've got some time, other than the playoff games, I think you've got some time to kind of wait and see on some things, see who's playing, see who's not, like the Will Levis thing, like, because you just don't want to make, particularly like the New Year's Six Bowls, because I made the mistake last year of betting whichever Pittsburgh, Michigan State game, whatever with Peach Bowl, betting that early, and then no one ended up playing, and then whoever was second string for Pittsburgh got hurt. So you have some time to kind of wait and see who's going to opt out, who's not going to play. I'll do my give a shit index next week. I will go through each game and tell you who I think actually does care and doesn't care about any of those particular games, which is just my cautious way of saying, like, be careful. If there's a look that you like right now for a bowl game, you're probably okay monitoring news for a little bit on some of these, unless you feel super strongly about it. That, like, for example, like if there's already been a huge exodus for portal guys at a team, you can probably make your assessment. Like if a guy has said he's going into the portal and then like a week later says I've changed my mind and I'm going to play in the bowl game, like, sure. I believe that actually was what happened with Jake Hayner last year, and it didn't even really end up mattering for Fresno State Super Bowl game they went to. So, just be cautious if you're going to bet those games now, because you never know what's going to happen. Before we just do a quick Army Navy, is there anything else you want to talk? I have nothing to add on Deion Sanders at Colorado. I think I'm going to echo the sentiment of everyone that it's going to be awesome one way or another. It's going to be either a train wreck.
It's going to be really fun to watch one way or another.
I'm
Either
glad
to get them to be winning the Pac-12 soon or really bad.
I think the one thing I'll say is I think that, like, just saying Shadur Sanders is coming and he's going to be your quarterback is a wild declaration, considering that Cam Ward had better stats in a tougher conference, although not super much tougher conference last year, and was not great at Washington State. And Colorado's infrastructure is not as good as what Washington State had. I also think that, like, while I understand the things he's like telling players to go in the portal, whatever stuff that happens and coaches do that, I think you have to really like walk a fine line as a college coach doing that, because you still can't piss off high school coaches with that kind of behavior. It's kind of one of those unspoken things where you need to be political with that, and I don't think not being political is, but whatever, man. It's going to be great. It's going to be exciting. I'm going to want to watch and see what happens, and it's like Colorado has nothing to lose here. Well, the only thing they have to lose is money. If it's an NCAA hell, which could happen, that's the only thing they have to lose. Otherwise, nothing to lose. All right, Army Navy. I have no thoughts.
Under. Just take the under. I love watching this game every year, but Service Academy. I know it's a low total, but 43-1, I believe, is what it is in the last however many. So you got to take it.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to do the Swiss thing. I said when Army played Air Force, I think that was the last one. I said it was un-American to not bet the under in that game, and the over never came close to hitting. That was a no doubt winner for us. I want to take the Swiss position and remain neutral here, because 32.5 is probably
low. It's low.
Probably too low. Like, I would not, if I was going to bet it, I would just for shits and giggles bet the under. But there is not a way in hell you could get me to bet this game.
Yeah, I think we're just at the point where Vegas is just these books are just calling everybody's bluffs, knowing they're going to take the under. But all right, like, the total in this game should probably be 36.5 or so. There's like, you know what? I'm going to go with a number that you're not going to take the under. You're probably not going to take the over either. But if you want to take the under, you got to give me 4 points or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, I know there's enough square bettors out there who are going to see like us talking about this, or like Sportsline or FanDuel or whoever put out the tweet. It's like, oh, the Service Academy unders are like, the unders have hit in like 50 of the last 54 Academy games. Like the total's 32.
Yeah, but not at 32 and a half.
The under. Like, there are going to be people who do that. So to the point where even if it's a bad number necessarily, I think it kind of still makes sense in some regards to put that to hang that number. So, like, man, God bless anyone who's actually going to bet that. Hope it's a good game. My whole thing is telling Matt off air, I don't think the game's ever really, like, it's not a game that I think the hype is fun. If you've never been, I would suggest going. I worked on it when we worked on College Game Day, and we were in Baltimore for it. And, like, the pregame fanfare and everything is awesome. The pregame and postgame stuff's fantastic. I just hope it's close and competitive, and that way we get a good fourth quarter.
It should this year. I don't see why it wouldn't be at this point.
You'll see the coaches kind of pull some stuff out of their hat. Also, this might, and I don't really want to dig deep into this, might be Ken Niumatalolo's last game. I don't think they're going to fire him. I think it might be like a mutual decision. That's a
Yeah,
program that like
he's been there for a long time.
he has. They've never recovered after the pandemic. The 2020 was bad for them. 2021 was
Hmm.
bad for them. 2022 has been bad for them. It might just be one of those things where it's kind of run its course, kind of akin to like David Shaw saying it's my time to leave Stanford. Shout out to them for thinking that Jason Garrett might be worth hiring. Like whatever.
Oh God,
I
yeah,
don't think that's going to
fine.
happen. I think they're going to hire Troy Taylor, who I've been advocating for. But nevertheless, would be weird, but I'd imagine they'd probably just go get like Bohannon, the coach at Kennesaw State, who is another one of the Paul Johnson tree guys who runs the triple. And I just don't think that it's ever going to be something that you're going to see the academies go away from. So there you have it.
Unfortunately, the weather it looks fine on Saturday in Philly. It looks
Yeah.
like 40s and like low 40s, high 30s, and sunny. Sad.
Yeah. If you give me a snowball, I could definitely get behind that.
The Snow Bowl a couple years ago, where Army had the all white uniforms, was elite. It was epic, just fantastic.
It was awesome. So like that's all you need to know.
It's a college football game on Saturday, folks. Watch it. There's some FCS stuff
Wait,
too.
hold on, because now I got to vamp for a second because I have to go to a holiday party tomorrow night. So I'm bummed because I think, yeah, there's 3 games. See, there's no FCS football on during the like they clear out. So there's 3 games tomorrow night, and then the only game on Saturday. Shout out Phil. The only FCS game on Saturday. Big ESPN. The Crusaders head to Fargo in the Fargo Dome to take on. Or no, they don't go to Fargo. Excuse me. What am I doing? They
South
go
Dakota.
to Brookings. They go to Brookings, South Dakota to take on the #1 seed South Dakota State Jackrabbits. According to, I think Caesars is who ESPN uses, that line is out to 18 points. No respect at all for the Crusaders.
I'm taking Cross.
I'd probably take South.
Give me Holy Cross.
And on that note,
give me the Cross.
Nope, I don't really have any feeling. I hope I'm home in time to watch Sacramento State Incarnate Word. Do you want to guess what the total of the Incarnate Word Sacramento State game is on Saturday?
High or low?
High.
79.5.
76.5.
I was close. I'll take the over.
But the weather's supposed to be fucking miserable. It's supposed to be rainy and windy, which like to me screams like,
hey, weather's tough on the defenses too.
It is. And these teams combined to average 90 points per game this year. So
Incarnate
Word is like old Big 12, throw the ball around the field.
Yeah, it's where Cam Ward came from.
Their quarterback, huh?
Cam Ward came from.
Their quarterback, Lindsey Scott, by the way, Lindsey Scott Jr., I think this is like his 6th school. Like he started at LSU. He was like a high school legend in LSU, went to LSU, flamed out there, went to East Mississippi Community College. I believe it was EMCC, the school from Last Chance U. I think he was there. He went JUCO. Then he went to Missouri. Then I think it was to Nichols. Then he went to Incarnate Word. And there might have been a stop somewhere else in there last year. I don't know how this guy's still in college. No idea whatsoever. So there you go. And they're playing at Sacramento State. So a long trip from San Antonio, Texas to Sacramento. You can throw out the record books when the Cardinals and the Hornets get together in a game of college football. But if you're looking for anything to do tomorrow night, I think the early game tomorrow is on ESPN2. I got to get this to work real quick. Yeah, Samford, not Stanford. Samford, North Dakota State is on ESPN2, 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. So if you're sitting around looking for some football to watch, I encourage you to check out that game. Root for the Bison so that my 12-1 ticket to win the national title comes through. So, yeah. I mean, we did 53 minutes, which I did not think we were going to do, but that was fun. I enjoyed that.
Good on us. I did too. It was good stuff.
All right, so
we'll be back next week.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. We'll start a bowl preview, like I said, probably 3 bowl preview shows. Maybe we'll split it up into 4 and just do the playoff games separate. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But we hope you guys have enjoyed hanging with us this season. We really appreciate it. We're going to have a great bowl season, which will start next week. So Matt and I will be back. Hopefully we'll be able to get Corporate Phil to come hang out with us as well as we get ready to preview the most wonderful time of the year. Not Christmas time, folks. Bowl season. We will talk to you